Fringe Radio, your trusted source for the paranormal, conspiracy theory, and true crime. Coming to you live from the Mistopheles Studios, it's Dark Fringe Radio.
I try to move, but my body won't work. I try to talk, but I lose all words. All that ever slips from my face are teeth and dreams I can't take. Waking from.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Dark Fringe Radio. I am your host, Will Martinez. This week I'm doing this one solo. Jay is out on vacation this week, so big up to Jay. Hope he's enjoying his vacation. So it's just me you got this week, so that's okay. But we have a really good episode this week. We actually are interviewing ATF or retired ATF undercover agent Ignacio Esteban and his book ATF Undercover, and we're going to be talking to him about a lot of subject matter when it comes to police work, when it comes to taking down organized crime, and really dealing with some of the really bad characters that are out there in our society. So, but wanted to remind everybody how you can listen to the podcast. You can go to our website, darkfringeradio.com. Make sure you go there directly. And also, our merch store is actually open there now. So you just go to the link on top. It'll take you right to our merch store, and and you can go ahead and look at the 10 different designs that we have out there for you available right now at darkfringeradio.com. And of course, if you can go to our YouTube page at Dark Fringe Radio, please like and subscribe to that as well. Really helps us out, and we really appreciate it. So that's enough about me and the website and the podcast. We're going to get into our interview with Ignacio Esteban here in a second, so I hope you guys enjoy. Hey everybody, today our guest is a recently retired special agent with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosions with the United States Department of Justice. As a special agent in the Miami-Tampa Field Division, he worked undercover investigating violent street gangs, international firearms traffickers, violent repeat offenders, and other types of federal investigations. Prior to joining the ATF in 2000, he was employed by the United States Customs Service at the Miami International Airport, member of the elite contraband enforcement team SET, seizing large amounts of cocaine and heroin entering the United States from Latin America. He's an author of over 70 books published on Amazon, including his autobiography, ATF Undercover. Please welcome to Dark Fringe Radio, our guest, Mr. Ignacio Esteban. Ignacio.
Hey, Will. I appreciate it, man. It's nice to see you on your show. I know we did the other one with What the Frick, so it's nice to see you here and do this one too. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. And I found you as a very compelling guest, having you on with What the Frick Live. You have a very interesting story, Ignacio. You really got yourself through the ringer, early in your career in Miami and Miami International Airport. Let's talk about that first, and let's talk about the genesis of your career. Tell us about that and how that started.
Yeah, how I started in law enforcement, it's easy. Like I said, at 26 years, retired, been a year and a half. But I almost named the book. I know you can see it, the poster behind me. That's the cover of my book there, ATF Undercover, The Accidental Agent. Because, of course, you grew up in Miami. It's the 80s. You have Miami Vice, right? And you look at Don Johnson, right? And you look at the Ferraris, and you say, man, that is pretty cool. And you're also a South Florida guy. So
Yes,
you
right.
know what I'm talking about. I think we're about the same age. And that was a big thing there. I said, man, so you put it back in your mind, that would be pretty cool. Something interesting there, buying a lot of dope and guns and all that flash that goes with it. I never thought I would be actually living that kind of life, but that's what ends up happening some ways. It's not always as glamorous. You don't always get to ride the Ferraris.
You don't get to do that all the time.
You're in a pickup truck. You're in a truck and you're doing whatever you can because you got to fit in, because you're not riding the nicest areas. Sometimes you're not so nice areas. And you got to be able to blend in and get to them, because if you stand out like that, it's going to be bad news for you. You're going to get carjacked and get ripped because dangerous people get involved. So I was studying up in Tampa at St. Louis University. I had my bachelor's in political science and history. Then I went to FIU, Florida National University, started my master's, and I accepted to go to law school up in Thomas Cooley, up in Lansing, Michigan. Very cold, very different. I'm a Florida guy, different South Florida. That would have been an extreme exchange. This is back in the mid-90s. Okay. So what I do decide is I see then the internet starts coming about, right? and I get Windows 95, and I start going online because a lot of jobs start being announced. They're going to the paper. You know how we had to go through the want ads and all that?
Oh yeah,
This
the old school times.
Fed World and all these were online. And people, it was funny. I'll tell you the side story here. Would make fun. I say, what's this internet thing? Why are you wasting your time with this? What's this dial up? Remember, we had to do dial up and everything else.
Oh,
people
yeah.
don't know. It was very
Right.
different when people started, and Windows made it easier. Bill Gates and all that changed a lot of things. So I did it. I put in for the job. They're looking for Spanish speakers with customs, those who understood Latin American culture. And obviously, I grew up in South Florida. I had a master's, worked on my master's, had a bachelor's degree, and I spoke Spanish because my parents are grandparents Spanish, came to Cuba. And then from Cuba, the Castro Revolution and the Communist Revolution came to the United States. And very fortunate, I was raised in, born in LA, Los Angeles, but raised in South Florida and Miami.
Got you.
So that's very part of my background, my story, who I am. Because my family suffered a lot because of the communists and everything else.
Yeah.
So I put in for the job and I'm hired. And I go from working on that to being in the front line right there in the mid-90s in the war on drugs. And I'm hired at Miami International Airport. I do about 6 months, 7 months in passenger processing, right, as an inspector. We have arrest authority, we carry a firearm and everything. And then I joined the contraband enforcement team, the SET team. And they are making, at the time, some of the biggest seizures in the country at the airports because, unfortunately, the corruption is so immense at the airport between the ramp workers, between the longshoremen and the seaport, within customs ranks. And I don't know if I told you this story in somewhere another place. Soon after, I said about a year in the job, the chief, one of our supervisors, he gets caught in an elaborate sting where he himself was with Honolulu Beach Police Department, escorting loads from Tamiami Airport, which is a smaller airport where they have flights coming in that's in Kendall, that they were clear themselves. They had like 200 or 300 pounds of cocaine coming in from Colombia that they would clear and then take to a different warehouse. He would be taken down. And that's one of my supervisors. So I'm thinking, man, and other guys would be arrested also for doing things similar. And that's among people who are in management. You're thinking, wow, that really opened my eyes pretty big. But it wasn't uncommon to see.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's
amazing the reach these people have to be able to infiltrate and turn somebody over, just for money. It really is amazing
for a chief. I mean, a lot of people I noticed that end up giving in, and is those who have financial issues. They have debts, bad divorces. They get themselves in a hole, right? And they're vulnerable for this kind of approach. And people know, when he's going to make about 300,000, and he's okay going himself with local cops, and they don't know the area, local cops in the area. So this is a nice conspiracy collusion here to help clear a load coming in from a private plane at Tamiami, or get 300 pounds of cocaine through. That says a lot right there. So if you don't have a good moral compass and a good background in your life, you get swayed that way. And I will see other people get swayed also. And you have to have a good compass. Big guys in the SET team, which I would be their trainees, because they're training officer, right? And after I would leave to go to ATF, and I'll talk about that, I would find out later that they were using their position, because we can carry a firearm onto airplanes, right, to help protect. So, but the bag that we carry wouldn't be cleared, right? And they would be taking kilos of cocaine, let's say, to Puerto Rico, and they would get busted. So
amazing.
It is amazing what people do when they get in a bad situation. But yeah, the SET team, it was when I was at the airport, it wasn't uncommon for us to see like 850 pounds of cocaine that came from Guayaquil, Ecuador, that's going to go in fish. So you had a big grouper, and you had a block of cocaine next to a block of ice. and that shipment was never going to go where it's supposed to. That goes outside and it disappears because of the corruption. What was so immense there. They get very creative. I've seen shipments where they were bringing in from Colombia. Because remember, in Miami, had so much cargo coming in. We had 747s just full of flowers, right? It's a handful of people.
Right.
So what are we going to be doing? We get maybe 1 or 2% of the stuff coming in. That was the quickest way for the Colombians back in the 90s to get the cocaine in. Not the slow boat that takes forever to go to the seaport. No, you're there in 5-6 hours from Colombia, if not faster. MIA, it gets ripped, it gets taken out there, and off it goes. And that's the quickest way to get it in there, day in and day out, because they know we have a handful. They would study us. They knew the shift work we had, right?
Yeah, they knew exactly. They knew what, okay, 1 or maybe 2 out of 10 shipments was going to get pinched. So they were like, okay, we already know what the losses are on those.
Yes.
Right?
You're right.
They already
You're
knew.
right.
So they already calculated into their losses, and they were like, okay, we already know 8 out of those 10 are going to be okay. 2 are not. So yeah, it's amazing.
And they know the best times to bring in, maybe during shift change, right? You know, less people. I mean, they do their homework because you know what? It's a billions of dollar business, right?
Yes, it is.
So they have a lot of people in their payroll, and it's their incentive to figure out what we're doing. And you see how people, they know that don't have a good work ethic. They know people who are approachable because they do their homework also, right? So those are the things I saw firsthand as a young man in my early 20s, and you like opens your eyes really quickly.
I'm sure.
So like I was saying before, so the flowers coming in 747s, it's not just kilos in there. Sometimes they were put it in the stems. So they had the ability to put the cocaine inside the stems. It's you really can't find that unless you had intel, or even with X-ray it was very difficult sometimes. Even with a good canine, we'll miss it a lot of times. So they knew how to smuggle, and the Colombians were really good at that time, smuggling a lot of cocaine into South Florida. And that's before they collapsed. You know, Escobar went down, the Medellin Cali cartels went down, and there'll be the rise, and we'll talk later about that, of the Mexican cartels, and El Chapo, Sinaloa, CJ&G, and Mencho, and how they are doing things a lot differently than the Colombians did things, and how they control not only Mexico, but Central America, South America, and there's something like we have never seen before.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, let's talk about your time from set now, moving from there to ATF and starting at ASAC. Talk to me about that transition, how that all worked out.
Yeah. So one thing with customs in Miami is you network with a lot of people, especially when you do a lot of arrests. You're talking guys from ATF, DEA, customs, and unfortunately at the time I wanted to be a customs agent because I'm an inspector. I'm making an arrest, and we're having arrest authority, and we're carrying a firearm, but you're limited to the border, right? You're limited to the airport, to the seaport, to that area where the international cargo is coming in or out. I was talking about stuff in, but a lot of stuff also goes out, and that stuff's even less checked. So all the proceeds, all the money, that goes out also, right? A lot of the guns these cartels need, they go out. So those teams are even smaller. So what's the percentage also? So those are a lot of things people don't realize. It goes into it. It goes back and forth. Our borders are very porous, very open in many ways. And we can talk about that in another show, how wide open they are. So I network a lot. I network federal agents. Unfortunately, customs agents don't want to hire inspectors and agents because they don't want to deplete the source because they need the inspectors there. But that's unfair to us. So I put in for ATF, DEA, FBI, and ATF is the fastest one and picks me up. And the good news is I don't have to go to the Southwest border. I don't have to go to New York City, San Francisco. I stay in Florida, and I start in Tampa. My old stomping ground went to school at St. Louis University, which is in north of Tampa in Pasco County. Yeah. So I get picked up there. I start working. This is 2000, and I become I start working with a lot of undercovers. The group I go into has a lot of undercover agents. And because undercover work is something where you just can't jump into, right? You have to study it because you get hurt. You have to develop a style. You have to learn how to what works where and what doesn't work. Some people are more of a listeners. And I developed a style where I would end up listening a lot, talking enough, but the jury at the end wants to listen to them talk, not to you talk, and see what kind of activity, what they're about, because that plays better with a jury. Because at the end, the kind of case you want to present is like a movie to the jury, which I did. I had the video, the audio. I had clear evidence. So when the jury deliberates, most of my cases, they pled because they're so strong, but they have to deliberate. I want them to feel strong about it. And same with to get to that level, you have to have the prosecutor also feel good about it. So the prosecutor feels good about it. There's no entrapment. They feel predisposed. This is what they do. This is what they did with you. This is what kind of case you have.
That's important that you say that, because in the audiobook that I was listening to, the ATF Undercover, that's a point that you really made in the book, was that, you could have the greatest case and have it all zipped up and nice presented with a bow. But if you have a very poor prosecutor and a very poor process in that whole thing, it really is not going to work out very well for you, is it?
No. It's a good team. And that's where you have to be careful, who you work with. I was fortunate enough, and I do talk some of the rough patches had at the beginning.
Yeah,
Right.
that's also something I wanted to ask about as well too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that in everywhere. You do get some ethnic discrimination, right? You get people who really, maybe this person, one of the people I dealt with didn't like Hispanics, right? He was in South Florida, now he's in Tampa, and you might butt heads because you have cultural differences. Doesn't like a certain language being spoken. You know, some people only want English only type mentality, but I'm bilingual, right? And my partner, I would transfer another group because it was headbutting going on. This ugly situation. And, you know, I talked a little bit about that in the book. The bullet catcher, the Puerto Rican bullet catcher, right?
Yeah. That's a crazy story, by the way. I was listening to it. I was like, there's no damn way. But I mean, I have to believe it at this point. Tell me that story, please.
Yeah, you look it up. He did a TV show when he retired in Ripley's Believe It or Not. And he's
wild.
done some things. Yeah, he was in Ripley's Believe It or Not, and he did some local news stories afterwards. And you can look it up. It's 1 in a million. And this happened in, South Florida, in the Westland Mall in Hialeah, back in the late 80s, 1987. He's effecting an arrest, and he goes, he has a SIG 9mm. The bad guy has a SIG 9mm, and he comes in from the front. He's the guy's in the car. He comes in the front to effect arrest. They have a SWAT team in the back, Hialeah SWAT, and he shoots at him, and it goes right into the barrel of his firearm.
Wow.
So that's what he ended up being called, the bullet catcher, right there. Boom. And then the guys from Hialeah, I guess glass and everything else. And he's trying to remember. I talked a lot about it. He's trying to pull the trigger. Nothing's happening. He can't figure out why nothing's working. And he's lucky the guy didn't fire some more rounds at him, because he got one. Okay, I'm gonna try 2 or 3 more and see what happens this time.
You're not that lucky at that point.
No, I don't think you keep on catching all the bullets.
Like the Matrix.
From the Matrix, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that's the same mall where that really horrible shootout happened in the what was it, the early 80s or mid 80s too? The Westland Mall.
Yeah, that's there was another shooting, I guess, out there also. There's quite a lot of shootings in South Florida, no doubt about that.
Yeah,
especially in the other. I know Dadeland Mall had a shooting back in the 80s with the Cocaine Cowboys. I remember that one too.
That's the one I'm thinking about. Yeah, okay, that's the one. Okay,
yeah, I remember that was around that era too. But and so the SWAT team then opens up and I think kills a guy, takes care of him from the back side of the vehicle. So they open up on him, and he's lucky there. But 1 in a million, I'm that story. So him and I became very close. He was not only a mentor, but we became friends. He was older than me, about 17, 18 years difference. So he was almost like more like a uncle type figure.
Right.
And he spoke Spanish, and I learned from him and watching his style and others how he did it, and then I developed my own style. Right. And I let my hair grow out. I didn't look like this. I didn't sound like this. Obviously,
no. There's some other pictures of you I've seen. Yeah, it's really wild. Yeah.
Long hair, big beard. I didn't get tatted out like some guys really get into their tats, because I wanted to be able, when I walk away, I'm back to who I used to be, right?
Yeah.
Because then that stays with you. And that really is not who I am. I mean, I some guys love that stuff. That wasn't what I was about. That wasn't me. So, I cleaned up pretty quick. When I'm done, when I went to end up going headquarters end of my career, it was one afternoon after 10 years never getting a haircut, because I had 10 years my hair super long, right to the back of my hair. I went to, because I transferred up in Northern Virginia, I went to one of the local shops out here, and just like that, cut it all up, give myself a shave, and I was in ATF headquarters, a different person. People said, "Man, I don't even recognize who you are." My wife said, "Man, it's like a different person." So, and I spoke with an accent, and I want people to think, I just came from Cuba, the asaño, and my English is broken. I mean, I don't want to think I'm super educated. You can't do that either, especially when you deal with mid-level people. No, you have to think that one of them. And like I said, I did cases with, had a lot of informants. And like I said, when you develop good informants and you're a good handler, you control them well, they can really help. And especially once they vouch for you, that's it. You're golden. If people say, okay, this guy's good, you're good. Can make it, but they can also destroy your cases. If they're trying to play both sides, then they can also ruin your investigation also. So you have to, that's what I did, is after the introductions were made, I cut them out. If I needed them, something's not going right, hey, when do you call him and see what he thinks about me? See what he says to you and get some more intel, and then let me know, and we can keep on going forward. So now I did a lot of cases of repeat violent offenders, gang members, armed drug dealers, armed home invaders, international firearms traffickers, domestic firearms traffickers, murder for hire cases. So we run the gamut of different. So ATF, people don't know, we do a lot of violent criminals. And most people don't understand, most ATF agents, I'd say 90%, once I dealt with it, I'm very pro Second Amendment. I'm very pro for your, protecting yourself, protecting your family, having your firearms. It's not about, where we want to take your guns away. The whole NRA image of jackbooted thugs, coming into your house, just taking guns and all that. That's at least ATF agents would take care of really violent criminals, very bad people. And that's what most of them do. We do. And very pro Second Amendment, very pro Second Amendment. So there's some misconception there. And then a lot of been going back and forth, but it does help for the NRA sell membership when you have the boogeyman, right?
Right.
And they made us the boogeyman because it helped sell membership there. Yeah, we became their whipping boy in many ways. And a lot of stuff written about that and stuff. But that's what I became. And I started doing a lot of undercover work from there on. And I was just the undercover, but I was also the case agent too. And they also signed me to property. So I was a vault custodian. And I also, because we're a smaller agency than the FBI or DEA, which is a lot larger, we have less than 3,000 agents, right? We got to do a lot more with a lot less resources.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And, I was listening to your book, ATF Undercover, which you guys can pick that up on Amazon.com. Just look up Ignacio Esteban. But you really get into some of the cases in Pasco County, which I'm familiar with in the Tampa area. I have family that lives out there in that area, and I've been in and out of that area many a times. But Pasco County, I know, is a breeding ground of some very nefarious type of activity. Can you give me an example, or maybe talk about one of the cases that you got yourself involved in? That, because there was at least 3 cases that I listened to, and I was just like enthralled because it was just like the whole setup and everything like that. It was just really interesting. Can you give me one of those stories if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, I will. Just before I do that, did you see in the news, just so happy people understand how dangerous Pasco has become, the MS-13 member in Holiday, who killed that Uber Eats delivery guy?
Yes.
That's pretty much brought him in the house, dismembered, killed him. And House of Horrors committed on that poor guy.
Yeah.
And then they found the bags, take him out. People don't realize a lot of this area is gang infested, and that's what I specialized in. I specialize. I wrote a book about that, the savagery and brutality of MS-13, Mara Salvatrucha 13. They're not just from the West Coast anymore.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Nationwide, in Canada, in Mexico too, and they've taken over Central America. They have really expanded, not just from El Salvador, and they really were Salvadoran immigrants. A little background on that, then I'll talk about my whole thing in Pasco County. But since you touched on that, it all touches all together. And if you haven't seen that story, what happened? The sheriff there, I met him a few times when I was in Pasco.
Is that Grady Judd?
White. No, it's another name. I used to deal with Sheriff White, and then this other guy's been there for years. Younger guy, Dynamic. Yeah, these guys are very satanic. They have that background, have a satanic rituals inside MS-13, and they're very bloodthirsty. And that's part of their culture and that's why the Trump administration wanted to deem them a domestic terrorist organization, because it's not like the mafia where there's a purpose and business behind it. A lot of these guys is about a body count. And this could have been about that the guy wanted to enhance his murderous reputation. He said, oh, so-and-so's been killing more than I have. Doesn't have to have a purpose. I mean, these guys are known all over the country to randomly kill people, couples, almost like serial killers. They randomly kill people, right? And that's what MS-13 has become. They started their background to do protection work for Salvadoran immigrants who were being targeted by other ethnic groups back in the late 70s and early 80s, and then evolved to this today. And then they got mass deportations because Salvadorians, some of them came illegally, they were deported, and then they spread because Salvador was a very corrupt country, very weak law enforcement, right? They took over. They went to Honduras, Guatemala, and now they just keep on in southern Mexico. They're all over Canada. They're all over the United States. They're going some places in Europe. They keep on expanding. So MS-13, Mara Salvatrucha, those kind of cases you're going to see of. I had cases like that too, putting these kind of people in jail. I did a really good case on the Valentine Bloods in West Pasco. At the time when I was there in 2000, I worked there for in Pasco County, hardcore, a lot of cases. I'll say from 2004-05 until I transferred in 2012.
Okay.
And I worked with the gang detectives, and we dealt with the worst gang members in Pasco County and take them out. And that's one of the cases we did. And we dismantled the Valentine Bloods at the time, which were involved in shootings, robberies, drug traffickings. And we went in there, and it took about 2.5-year investigation. And at the end, we took out the whole hierarchy from top to bottom. But like anything else, the main guy, he ended up getting almost 17 years. lesser players got lesser time. We had drug conspiracy cases, firearms, etc. They got out, and like anything else, it's generational. If you don't break the cycle, the sons, the cousins, they get into this world.
Yeah.
And they're back into it.
Well, not only that, I mean, you take these guys out, and then now there's a power vacuum now too, right?
That's right.
So that allows other gangs to come in and infiltrate where they weren't allowed to before, because the stronghold that the Valentine Bloods had in that area, now that's gone. Now they say, oh, well, now this is our time to capitalize and maybe get something out of the pie here now. So that's super crazy. It just
seems like we take one out, it just spreads. It's like an ant colony, right? You hit this part of the ant, it just goes around and just keeps on getting stronger and has more tentacles. Maybe it's really, really unfortunate. I've talked about in my book also, and other books I've written about the fall of the Mexican Mafia. I mean, the fall of the Italian Mafia and the rise of the street gangs and the cartels in this country. It's stronger than ever. The bikers are still there, but they're not strong. They've gotten weaker. The one percenters, and the Mafia is completely decimated. Decimated. Italian Mafia is completely decimated in this country. But the cartels and the street gangs are flourishing. So I mentioned the Valentine Bloods. I mentioned other hardcore traffickers, and also I did a lot of also trafficking cases too. Florida is a source state for weapons, and I would deal with all different kinds of characters, from a dirty FFL, federal firearm licensee. I mean, those are people who are supposed to give the public trust to have a license to do things the right way. We're not, and unfortunately, there's a good, I don't say a lot, but there's a good 5%, maybe more, that do what this guy did. And I'll tell a little story about him.
Yeah.
What he did. And this started with, like anything else, you start an investigation and you work your way up, right? I had this guy was trafficking guns to Puerto Rico. He was from Wesley Chapel. I had an introduction from an informant. He was already convicted out of Puerto Rico for trafficking firearms. He was a dirty FedEx employee, right? He was back. And then he was already convicted felon pending sentencing. Okay? Pending being sentenced. And now he's selling guns. He goes to the flea markets and gun shows. He's buying. He's selling me quite a few guns. He's selling me FNs, 5.7 millimeters, very high-end weapons, right? At the end, with a buy bust, I have a team from Puerto Rico who had a case on him, and I will put a case on him. I buy a Tommy gun from him with a 75-round drum, about 10 other weapons, and we'll do a buy bust and take him down right there in the Target and Wesley Chapel. Boom.
Wow.
He's done in his house with more weapons. That's just one guy right there. We get another source he used to deal with. He's a school teacher up in Citrus County. Right? And so you see all walks of different people. And this is fascinating about ATF. It's not the same kind of person you think of. Okay, this guy was a former FedEx employee, right? He went dirty. This guy's a school teacher. He's stealing firearms without a license. You need to get yourself set up because you're not doing backgrounds. You're buying all these guns, right? And he kept on repeating buying for him because he's been doing this supplement because he's a school teacher up in Citrus County. They probably make, I would imagine, maybe $30,000 a year, maybe less. And he has a nice truck, right? He wants a certain lifestyle, right? So he's supplementing it, doing this, but he's not doing it the right way because he's not doing backgrounds. He's buying guns, no paperwork being done here at all, and there's certain ways to do things. So I deal with him, and I buy a lot, until at the end, we take him down with like 40-some weapons in a car up in Hernando County. We take him down. I get introduced. I meet a federal firearms licensee, and he tells me that he says, hey, I tell him my guns don't stay here. They go down other places, to Mexico. I said, oh, not a problem. He said, I cook my books pretty much. He said, I order from the wholesaler, and I don't put them into my A&D, acquisition disposition book. So ATF, when the inspectors come, right, they'll check. They won't notice what guns I have missing and don't have. So he would tell me how he'll do a workaround and sell me the guns. So we would take him down also. And he was a federal firearms licensee. And he was an older white man in his mid-50s, maybe I think 60s at the time. And he was doing that way also. And a lot of guns will get off. And he said he was dealing with people who were selling guns, sending them out to in the ports to Puerto Rico and to Mexico.
So he was funneling all this stuff to different countries and getting away with it, and nobody ever knew.
Until I got introduced to him, and then he ended up losing his license. And again, and it's unfortunate with firearms trafficking cases. The former FedEx guy, he ended up getting 5-6 years because he was a convicted felon, right? And the amount of weapons he had. The teacher, he got probation. Okay,
little slap on the wrist
a lot of weapons. Yeah, so you don't get a big punishment for firearms trafficking. And this FFL lost his license, got 2 years.
Wow.
I think the punishment, and I talk about that in my book, I think,
Mm-hmm.
where we need to have stronger punishment for firearms traffickers, right?
Yes,
Just like we
absolutely.
do for armed and minimum mandatory, where there is a big punishment when you're trafficking guns, at least a minimum mandatory of 5 years for a lot of these gun guys who are trafficking a lot, at least 10, 15 weapons. Because if not, it's really, oh, you get slipping, a slap on your wrist and you get made probation sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or the straw purchasers who go into the stores to buy guns for felons. They lie in the forms, right? The ATF form when you go to FFL, and that's how they're trafficking guns. And we usually get a lot of cases like that too, where guys will buy, same make and model, 8 or 10 of the same, the red flag right there,
That's a
and those guns
problem.
will be trafficked.
Right.
Because I was also in a trafficking group at the end of my career with Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE in Miami, and we used to do a lot of trafficking cases. People doing that all the time, and the guns would be going to Jamaica, to Haiti, to the Caribbean, Mexico. It's just a hub of people wouldn't imagine how many weapons. So it's fascinating. I think if you like these stories, I think people like my book, and they'll enjoy the listen or the read, whichever you
Absolutely.
prefer. I think you'll enjoy it.
Yeah,
And
go
I give
everybody.
a shout out to Sean Milo, my professional voice actor. I think he did a great job, and we're working on a lot of more books. We could have 70 of them.
Right.
The next one we're working right now is the most dangerous crime syndicates of our time. That one has a lot of stuff put together. It's all the short stories I put together between the Italian Mafia, the one percenters, Yakuza, the cartels, and other groups all in there. So we're like 300. It's going to be almost 7 hours. That one's going to be almost 7 hours. And then I'm doing Killers and Tyrants, which I also do politics because of my background. I talk about, communist China. I do, what's going the war in Ukraine. And I do a lot of political books from Gaddafi to Castro to Nicolas Maduro, which is an indicted domestic narco terrorist, right? He's out there still. So a lot of interesting things. And then I mix it with a lot of killers and tyrants and everything else. I think that's another one that's going to be pretty interesting. So
yeah, you really cover the gamut of all this stuff, man. You really,
I enjoy
really...
it. I love it, man. I never thought I'd be doing this. I'll be honest with you. And when I retired from headquarters ATF, I never thought I'll be writing. I become, a prolific writer, people call me. And now I'm doing these shows, and I really enjoy that. I've been doing these shows now for over a year now. And I shout out. Let me give a shout out to Hollywood Wade from Crime Entertainment. He saw me first. He liked my work. He put me on, and it just snowballed. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted me on, blah, blah, blah. And it just keeps on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I really enjoy these shows. I come prepared too. I think people notice that. I come prepared with what I enjoy. Sometimes you notice that some people don't, and I don't tell the same story. And I don't tell the same story. I can tell you 100 different stories 100 different times.
Well, listen, I mean, that's interesting, man. And you really do a good job of getting your stuff out there. And like I said, you have a lot of things that you cover on Amazon. Go check out the books, please, everybody. Also the autobiography, ATF Undercover. But let me ask you this, Ignacio. Obviously you have to get into this mentality of being an undercover agent, right? How do you balance that with your personal life? How do you go from being Mr. A guy at work and then go home and be Mr. B guy? How does that work?
Yeah, you got to disconnect very, very quickly. Good thing is I had a good hour drive from Pasco to where I lived in South Hillsborough, right? Okay. So that helps. You have an hour to disconnect and get yourself and get prepared. And sometimes that's good to have that time. It's like a commute. In some ways, a commute's good, right? Because I think a lot of people have their work persona and the other home persona, right? You get maybe people who are bosses have to act a certain way, and when you're at home, you have to act a certain way. So you get that commute time to get your head together and say, okay, now I have my little ones here. We're going to do this. My wife, we're going to work on this stuff there. And you have to be good to focus. When it's time to focus at work, you focus at work. When it's time to focus on your home life, you try to focus on. But it's tough because the job I had also, you had an informant. And informants call you all different hours, right? And they have their own issues too. And bad guys, when you're dealing with them, they test you, and they call you. Let's say Sunday night to see if you're going to pick up. And I always have my UC phone with me, right? And I always record those calls. So you have to excuse yourself and go. And once you're calling these guys Sunday night, it's like, okay, there's no way this guy could be an agent if he's calling me back on a Sunday night where most agents want to work. They think only work 9 to 5, right? I worked all the time. A good undercover is always ready and prepared and willing to work, especially in a case that you're passionate about and you want to see succeed. If not, these cases fall apart. and then you're spinning your wheels. And I was down one day, and I overcame a lot of problems. It wasn't easy. You made
I'm
my
sure.
book here. Yeah, I dealt with some bad supervisors.
Oh, well, we have all dealt with those kind of people, but being outside of the undercover work in your personal life, have you ever encountered somebody that was part of your work life while you were in your personal life, like maybe just being out and about? Has that ever crossed paths?
No, because I worked such a big distance.
Okay.
I did that on purpose. Yeah, I would not work where I lived. That's for sure. So, and if people don't know, it's a big drive from west side of Pasco, let's say New Port Richey, Wesley Chapel, Dade City, and all the way down South Hillsborough. Those worlds don't collide. Those worlds don't collide. And a lot of these guys don't have the means. They're mid-level, street level. That's their world, and they kind of don't expand too far from that level. And I know that too. And the world I live with down south was completely different there also back then. And same in South Florida. I will live, let's say, down in Kendall, right? Okay, and a lot of stuff I would do up in Hollywood and Hollandale, right?
Yeah, so like an hour away, basically. Yeah,
an hour. So you keep those worlds separate. Yeah, I would not be working unless I try to say those are things I think about and plan ahead. So I tried not to have those kind of, but it happens. But I fortunately didn't happen to me.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Let's switch gears for a second here, Ignacio. Let's talk about something a little bit different. You also wrote another book called Biker Gangs, the One Percenters. So this was really interesting. I read this book. I found it fascinating because I have a weird infatuation with biker gangs. Ever since I was a kid. That's I think we had this discussion offline, but ever since I was a kid, I didn't know about any gangs. There was no Bloods, there was no Crips. Where I grew up, there was no Latin Kings, there was none of that stuff.
Where did you grow up?
Here in West Palm. So so there really wasn't a huge proliferation of that stuff. I mean, we saw it maybe in the periphery, but nothing crazy. But what I did see a lot of were biker gangs. Biker gangs. Really? Yeah. Ever since I was a kid. And, that's something that always stuck with me. And I read this book and I found it very, informing because I didn't know about the Big Four. I didn't know anything about that. But tell us a little bit about this book. Tell us about the OMGs. Explain to listeners who the Big Four are, if you could, and give us a little introduction.
I have it now as the Big Six. Because you got the ones the Hells Angels, right?
Right.
The Outlaws, right? You have the Pagans, you have the Vagos, the Bandidos, the Mongols. So that's why I have as six. There's so many other ones, but those are the ones they're really the strongest. There's so many. So they're considered a criminal enterprise, right? So a lot of racketeering cases. What's a racketeer and RICO influenced corrupt organization cases are done on them with their conspiracies to promote their organization, their enterprise. So I found them also fascinating. I worked a few cases with the outlaws out there in Florida, and they were outlaws in Pasco County and Tampa. For a while it was an outlaw state, but I've been out of that game in 2012. I went to Miami, worked different kind of cases, more with armed drug dealers and gang members of firearms trafficking, right? I did some of that too, but I dabbled a lot in gangs and stuff up there. And I noticed the outlaws had control of Florida back in, I would say 2000s to maybe 2012, 14. And then now it seems like the Mongols, who are West Coast, right? Have come over to Florida with, and joined an alliance what I've been reading and studying and talking to people with the Pagans. So you have now the Mongols and the Pagans now like joining forces to take over Florida to push out the outlaws. It seemed like the outlaws, ever since the fall of Taco Bowman in the late 90s, right? He was the face of the outlaws, ruthless, vicious, brutal individual, which shows you. And he was a guy raised in Detroit and Michigan area, and he went to Catholic schools. He sent his kids to private schools. Wow. And he ended up becoming a murderer. So it's amazing how people turn like that and what caused them to turn. You hear about that like serial killers who are altar boys or hitmen, right? Well, we at the show we saw that one guy who he went to Catholic school. He was an altar boy,
right?
And because a hitman for the Mafia, mindset. You see it, and you're like, wow, I went to Catholic schools. I guess they do have percentage, but I guess they didn't learn the message from the priest or the brother or the nun. So
they must have skipped that day.
Fell through. Yeah, they forgot about that. Thou shalt not kill.
Right. It's usually at the top of the list, usually.
Oh my goodness. So
Yeah.
that's where I see Florida in a battle. I think it's
Mhm.
interesting. Florida's in a battle right now for the heart of that. But again, they're not what they used to be. I mean, people
Mhm.
think of that bikers, how, badass they were, back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But with the fall of the mafia, the fall of a lot of organized crimes, it seems like the cartels are getting stronger and stronger, and they're pushing through harder. And the street gangs, because the Mongols were in a nasty battle in Southern California. I talk about in my book, in
Yeah, the
the
biker
rise and
wars.
fall of
Yeah.
Cavazos,
Yeah.
and with the not the Sureño but Mexican Mafia,
Mhm.
and they lost,
Wow.
because the Mexican Mafia has a lot of street soldiers, right? Foot
Mhm.
soldiers, with
Right.
Sureños and other ones. So any group, MS-13, any group
Mhm.
that puts, what's the 13 mean? The 13 is the M is the 13th letter in the alphabet.
Right.
La M. The Mexican Mafia is
Mhm.
known as La M. So any
Miami.
group that puts a 13 hyphenated to it, MS-13, or other groups that put MS-13, Sureño 13,
Mhm.
Sur 13, that means they have an alliance with the Mexican Mafia. So
Mhm.
very strong group. And that's a foe that you don't want to fight. You don't want to fight. Especially a lot of these guys where Doc Cavazos himself was a Sureño, who don't know
Mhm.
him. He grew up in the street gangs. So which is very different. You look at Taco Bowman, a guy who grew up in Catholic school. How do you get involved in that culture? Which I found
Right.
fascinating. But I understand how this guy did. He was a Sureño, street guy, right?
Mhm.
He got recruited by the Mongols, and I guess he didn't respect what he saw there. He saw these
Right.
guys, a bunch of drunk guys, and he knows in the street you have to be respected. So he
Mhm.
makes the mistake. He starts bringing in a lot of his old buddies from the Sureños and making them Mongols, right? But a lot of these guys don't even know how to ride a bike. They don't have a Harley. So it's not really a biker gang. Guys in trucks would throw in there
Right.
because they don't own any of that. They didn't grow up with that culture. It's a different
Mhm.
culture. And then
Mhm.
the Mexican mafia says, no, you got to pay a tax. You're taking our foot soldiers away from us. He doesn't want
Mhm.
to do that. He tells him
Mhm.
pound sand. Doesn't end up well for him because at the end, it's not just one, an Operation Black Rain, ATF operation, not two,
Right.
not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven, but 8 ATF agents infiltrate the Mongols. 4 male, and then they bring their girlfriends in because they can't be getting hit on by other ones. So they bring 4 female agents in to play as their girlfriends, and it's
Mhm.
complete devastation for the Mongols.
Wow.
Complete
Do you
devastation. They hit them hard.
do you think that the fall of the mafia allowed the cartel to come into the United States? If like, let me ask you this: if the Italian mafia was still running hard like they did, let's just say like in the 80s and 90s, do you think the cartel would have still been around?
Oh yeah, cartels stronger than them ever were. They're
Mhm.
more vicious, more brutal, more thirsty. I mean, the stuff these guys do, it's unbelievable. If you haven't seen the videos out there, how
Mhm.
brutal these guys are.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, you look at Las Cepas, how
Mhm.
the disease, how brutal they are. Sinaloa. I mean, El Chapo Guzman, his rise in ranks, he came from object poverty, right? Selling
Yeah.
oranges in the streets
Mhm.
to worth billions and billions of dollars. Net worth was like 10, 12 billion dollars. Obviously, now he's in the supermax. But what he was good at, just like Mencho Cervantes, was they were killers and they
Right.
killed early.
Yeah.
And you messed with their territory, you got killed. You sold them bad product, you got killed. You did something, you looked them the wrong way, you get killed.
You got killed. Right.
And not just
Yeah.
you, but your whole family too.
That's the crazy part. And you know what? It's funny that you mentioned the Chapit or Chapo. His sons are kind of wreaking havoc down there right now, the Chapitos. I'm not
Yeah, the
sure if you
Chapitos are. Yeah. So one of them
yeah,
just got
yeah.
arrested again. One of them just got
Right,
arrested. Yeah.
right.
And yeah, it's always gonna be somebody. If it's not the son, it'll be the cousin or the nephew. Because you know what?
Mhm.
When something like this is making 15, $20 billion a year, and these guys came from nothing. I mean, this guy was semi illiterate. He dropped out of school in 5th grade. And these
Right.
guys, all these guys are the same, but they know how to do this, and they're good
Yeah.
at this, and they have no
Mhm.
qualms
Mhm.
killing, none at
Right.
all, and they don't care. And if you learn a lesson, well, bring the wife and the kids in front of them, and dismember them in front of him, and then kill him. And this is what we do, people like you. And if you're a
Mhm.
police and you want to enforce the laws, well, they'll go after you too, and they'll target you and your whole family, and then they'll dismember you. Go in the precinct, which is a lot of cases like that. These small little towns because they
Mhm.
outgun them. They go in there, they kidnap the officers, and then they do House of Horrors, dismember them, and leave little signs are, this is what happens to those who enforce the laws in this town. Are you going to enforce the law if you're a police officer then?
Yeah, that's kind of hard to swallow on that one, right? Yeah.
You're probably going to say, you know what, I'm going to look the other way, or I'll be part of this because I don't have enough firepower, and these guys have all the firepower. And of course, a lot of it comes from the United States, and Mexico has very strict gun laws, and that's why I say you can have all the gun laws you want, but the bad guys are not going to follow it because look at these guys. They have all the money, all the power. They have anything they want. They go after the police. They terrorize the local villagers or citizens, and they go after the military too. It's not uncommon them to shoot down with their Barretts, 50 cal Barretts, helicopters in the air, military helicopters. So they go to war with everybody. They go to war and they're prepared.
Ignacio,
corruption is the biggest problem in Mexico. Corruption.
The corruption, of course. So Ignacio, so you being having all this experience and learning how to take down, organizations, what do you think is the way to combat the cartel situation here in the United States?
Yeah, that's a difficult situation. It took years to get bigger, right? Where they are now, it's going to take years to fight it. But like I said, we're losing the war on drugs. We've lost the war on drugs. How we combat? Well, very simple. People stop using. People don't use. There are the drug business, right? It's like with alcohol, they legalized it. I don't know if we can legalize cocaine and heroin. I know marijuana, it appears, at least in the state I'm in now, has been legalized recreationally, right? But a lot of states, I think Florida's medical, I think may go recreational now. What they're talking about, a lot of states you look all over, it's recreational now. So you start with marijuana, okay. Other drugs, people need treatment. I think that's the key right there is treatment, get help, start at a young age. I know Nancy Reagan, Reagan's wife said, just say no. Yeah, but you need kids to see maybe a scare straight program. This is how your life can end up getting really crappy and out of control. You become an addict, a junkie. And you don't want that kind of life. Maybe have former users come in and help kids, get straight, because that's where you have to start, where it doesn't get to, okay, maybe hit the marijuana part, but don't go into the heroin, the cocaine, and A, financially, and B, it also ruins life. And all these pills they're taking too, right?
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. I just read an article about the Chapitos, and it said according to this report, they were responsible for the majority of the 107,345 lethal overdoses between August 2021 and August 2022, according to an indictment filed in New York.
Sinaloa.
Yeah, that's the fentanyl. I mean, the fentanyl right now is it's crazy. It's exploded.
It's something where people really, really need to get help and really understand how dangerous this is. And there's nothing sexy or fun about this, right? There's nothing cool about this.
Right.
This is going to destroy your life, destroy your family. You know how a family's been destroyed over this? It is
absolutely
appalling. It's appalling. And not just the United States. It's a problem in Canada. It's a problem in Europe. It's becoming a global problem. And a lot of these cartel groups hate the United States. And they want to weaponize it. And it's corruption from within these governments too. You look what happened in Honduras with Hernandez, who was extradited, who used to be the president, and he was saying that it was to be, and he had the military protecting the drug loads from Colombia and Venezuela to then come over here so that he can weaponize against the United States, so America fall like a rotten apple from within. That's what they're trying to do. A lot of these countries. Nicolas Maduro hates this country. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
I mean, he's a narco trafficker. He's no communist. He's Hugo Chavez. He's no communist because he lives in a palace. He's worth billions. Well, he's no communist. Even though his father was a hardcore communist, he went to Cuba and studied communism with Fidel Castro. But these are capitalists. These guys are all about making money. The people are going to be kept a certain way, but this guy doesn't live like that. No, and he controls it. And anybody questions or confronts him, he's told the last election. Anybody knows that? You're in South Florida. I deal with a lot of Venezuelans, and he stole the election. And he's there. He's a dictator. He's there illegally. He needs to be replaced. He's been indicted. Maybe they'll bring him in like or Noriega back in 1989 in Operation Just Cause. Yep. Maybe. I hope so. I hope that they don't give him a lifeline and we start taking oil there with Chevron, because he'll stay there forever.
Right.
I know Putin's bad, but we can't help Venezuela and keep this guy either. So I've talked about it in my book too.
Yeah, so it's amazing how these ancillary countries, really affect what's going on here in the United States. I mean, for instance, Cuba is like 90 miles off the coast of Key West, literally. And do you see a lot of activity coming from Cuba now? Still, even after Castro has been supposedly
Been
been
dead
dead
for years
after all.
now. Castro been dead.
Yeah.
His brother Raul is soon to die. He's in his 90s. He's the last of the revolutionists, right? That
Right.
came into power in the late 50s.
Mhm.
Yeah, a different generation. We hope for change. I mean, a lot of the video I see out there, you see a lot of exposure of rations and how struggling they are with the communist system. This whole
Yes.
centralized system doesn't work, and people are suffering. I think they want to embrace, because Cuba used to be a very prosperous nation before
Yes.
Castro. It was very
Mhm.
successful, very capitalistic.
Mhm.
Hoping that I'll like to go one day to visit Cuba. I haven't
Americans
been
used to
there.
go over there and gamble back in the early 60s. That was the place to go. I
50s,
mean,
yeah, it was big in the
yeah,
40s and 50s.
yeah.
And when this country had prohibition, people come to the United States, I mean to Cuba, to get away from the prohibition that the United States
Mhm.
had. So they had always that whole culture, their gambling and everything else. It's very well done. And then we can talk about that in another show. The rise and fall of the mafia in Havana led to the rise in Las Vegas, because
Oh,
the
really?
collapse there at Sam Trafficante Jr., Meyer Lansky, it was a who's who. Lucky Luciano. In
Mhm.
fact, they had the Havana Conference there in the late 40s after the Second War. The creation of the mafia was entrenched with Batista there, Florencio Batista, and the
Mhm.
corruption there. So, yeah, I mean, there was issues there in Cuba. Obviously, a lot of corruption with the mafia, but this was worse. Sometimes better the devil you know than the devil you
Then
don't
they
know.
don't know. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I know that one.
And that's a hell of a devil. And that was a hell
Yeah,
of a devil.
yeah, yeah.
Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, man. And then at the end, how does he pay? Has him killed when he's out in South America,
Right.
in Bolivia,
In Bolivia,
because he was
right.
getting too. He didn't want his to get bigger than him. He had to be the ultimate El Comandante Revolutionary, right?
Right. Yeah, of
That's what
course.
Fidel Castro had to be. He had a huge
Yes, he
ego,
did.
brutal.
Yeah,
Yeah, he did. So, and
yeah.
that's a little politics there. And I write about that, Cuba, Castro and the mob. So, and I put that in my other books about organized crime and everything else. And interesting things, like my own family members didn't realize how much the mafia was in Cuba.
Hmm.
You look
Hmm.
at some of these names. San Trafficante was out of the Tampa family, and I
Right.
would see some of his stuff when I worked in Tampa.
Hmm.
Meyer Lansky was in Miami.
Right.
He came back. None of these guys, they had a lot of money and they lost it all just like that, because
Yeah.
Castro nationalized a lot of the stuff, never to
Hmm.
return to Cuba,
Hmm.
never to
Hmm.
return to Cuba. So
There you go.
that's fascinating within
No,
itself.
it is. It is very fascinating. And again, we talk about all these organized crime, just agent, just outfits, and these people that are able to really organize a system where it's really hard to break. And then when you have money involved and you have so much power involved, it is
Yeah.
almost impossible to break. Where do you see us being able to get ahead of that, or is that just something that's always going to be a perpetual thing, you think? Is it always going to be just always against us, them, always us, them? Is it always ever going to end, you think?
You talk about the corruption
Yeah,
and we're
yeah,
dealing with.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something that's like I said, we have to shake if we're not going to shake our addiction for drugs.
Hmm. Right.
And I was going to go when I was in headquarters. I was thinking about going in, because we have agents all over the world too.
Hmm.
We have an Europol, Interpol in
Hmm.
Mexico and El Salvador and different locations. And I was thinking about going into Mexico City and working there. But then Lopez Obrador is kind of a socialist who his tactics with the not like Calderon, who was very aggressive against cartel leadership. He's very
Hmm.
soft with cartel leadership, right?
Hmm.
He was hoping that the violence would go away if he appeased them. It hasn't.
Right.
It's things that been as violent as ever, even more than with Calderon and Peña, and of course Peña Nieta. They say there's issues with him that he was under to take. That's why El Chapo was a fugitive for so long.
Hmm.
According to his trial, allegedly one of the witnesses said that Peña Nieta wanted to be paid off like about 300 million, and he offered him 100 million, and he took it.
Wow.
So if
Wow.
the guy on the top is taking that kind of money, what are your
What are
chances
you
of
going
that?
to do? Right.
Yeah, I mean, look at recently with Lopez Obrador and that there was a general named Cienfuego. You can look this one up. It was
Hmm.
LAX. He had been
Hmm.
indicted for money laundering. They had him arrested, and he insisted the United States release him.
Really?
Insisted, and
Insisted.
the Trump administration put pressure, and he did. Question is why? What was he afraid what he's going to say? What was going
Right.
to happen? So
Yeah.
why would he want to? He's been indicted and have the case, and let's see how it plays out. So, and then he revoked our diplomatic immunity in the United States.
Mm.
So agents down in Mexico don't have diplomatic immunity and don't want to carry us weapons and don't want to do any investigations. Well, I'm not going to be in there in that kind of. I'm going to take my family in that kind of culture, with not being well armed, no diplomatic immunity, and you don't want. Well, what am I doing here? Yeah. That's not going to work. And I retired, and I said did my time in headquarters, which was great. I had to work the street, and saw the street, and then I promoted, and it's a process just to promote, and I went to headquarters, and I worked with the number 1 in command for the Central Region, who later became number 2 command overall for ATF, and became good friends with him. And I got to see a lot behind the scenes what was going on with ATF, which was fascinating. It's different when you're in the street and then when you're in headquarters, how things are. So I find, and I talk a lot about my book also about all that stuff, which I think is pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys can check that out, of course. ATF Undercover, you can check that out at Amazon.com. Just look up Ignacio Esteban. Ignacio, listen, I mean, we've covered this subject here for an hour. I mean, we could talk about another 2 hours talking about this
a lot of things to talk about. And we haven't touched politics, really.
We didn't even touch politics. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, but you have such a prolific outreach right now when it comes to all your books. Continue to keep writing, my friend. Let me tell you that. It's great. I mean, really, I mean, the more material you put out there, the better. And just hearing all these wonderful stories, I think it's an eye-opening experience for a lot of people. So, Ignacio, tell everybody where they can find your stuff and follow you and things like that.
Oh yeah. I'm exclusively on Amazon. Exclusively on Amazon. So you type my name, you'll see I have an author page there too. With my bio, all my 70 books are there. If you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, all my books are free. ATF Undercover is exclusively on Audible, so you can look at that also. I'm also, if you like our content here, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and also you can go on YouTube or Rumble, type in my name. I've done now close to, I think, over 70 shows at least.
That's amazing.
I've done so many in a year. I'm always getting, and I do live shows, I do all kinds of shows, a variety of different types of international. I do shows in Australia. I do shows in London. I've done shows all over the U.S. And it's really, really fun. And I'm hoping now also working on I finished the screenplay on my hopefully for a pilot for a TV series based on my life, ATF Undercover. I think that'll be exciting too. And I'm also looking at other avenues. People said, yeah, maybe you should do since you have so much content. I had producers reach out to me and say, maybe you should do your own docuseries. Absolutely. Or documentary. And so I'm thinking about doing that. I'm looking at some of the stuff like that. I'm also writing now a book on serial killers, psycho killers. I just finished the first chapter.
That's right up my alley right there, my friend. Yeah. Oh, Ted Bundy. Yeah.
I just finished Ted Bundy. I'm going Dahmer next. And I have like 14 of them that I might do. Like I didn't know much about H.H. Holmes.
The
original one here in Chicago,
Chicago.
House of Horrors.
House
of Horrors. He said torture chambers and everything else.
Traps and stuff like that. Yeah, it's crazy.
Some people think that he may have been Jack the Ripper. They came over because about the same time, or maybe they're different Jack the Rippers, and he was one of them. There's that's theory out there too that people copycat, right?
Yep.
And they listen to paper, and then the other guys, it was a lull, and maybe this one came over here. There's a lot of theories. I'm going to talk about that in my book too. So that's exciting. I kind of like that. So I always find topics that make me excited.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful, man. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you're a writer out there and you like writing, let me say this: find something that's passionate about, that you really enjoy. Dive into it. I like typing. I'm not a physical writer. I just like on my keyboard and just start. I have my outlines. I do my outlines first, then I start typing. And you gotta make changes. You don't be afraid of editing, but get out there and write the product, get it done. Go work on it back and forth, and then you can go. If you can't get a publisher, don't recommend it. I self-published everything. Go to Kindle, Amazon. You self-publish, and you can keep 80% of it.
It's
all yours.
Yeah. You're not paying somebody else to put out your book for you. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
No, then you get some of them really. It's a lot of things out there you need to be careful about. Don't sign any contracts without understanding. Get your attorney because it won't be good for you. At least with this, it's yours. You own it. You own the rights to it. Okay, you can take it off when you want. You can publish. There's so many advantages to it. But you have to. I do it all. I market myself, just like my undercover. Remember, I did everything myself. I was a case agent. I was undercover. I did the property, my workup.
So you're already used to this.
I'm used to it. So I'm doing the same thing now. I do my marketing, my own shows. I promote myself. I talk to a lot of people, and I'm always networking. And don't be afraid to meet new people. Without Facebook and these shows, I never would have met Will. I never would have met the network of people that I have met, which is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. Listen, Ignacio, thank you so much for coming on Dark Fringe Radio. Everybody, go check out his stuff at Amazon.com. Just look up his name, Ignacio Esteban. You'll find all of his books there. 70 plus. My gosh. I mean, geez.
And counting, yeah.
And counting. Yeah, he's not done yet. And so,
No.
Ignacio, thank you so much again for coming on the show. We'll have to have you on for part 2. And
sure.
Thank you again. Thank you again.
Thank you, Will, man. Always.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ciao.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview with retired ATF agent, Mr. Ignacio Esteban. I mean, what a great interview. A lot of insight. Man, just go out there and try to get his book, ATF Undercover. Go to Amazon.com and check it out. You'll really enjoy it. It's a really fascinating look into police work and how to take down, organized crime and, very nefarious people out there. So it's a really, really, really good read. Make sure you check that out. Again, Amazon.com, Ignacio Esteban. So, again, everybody, if you can, please check out our website, darkfringeradio.com, and make sure you check out all our stuff there. Over 124 episodes now and counting. And make sure you check out our merch store at darkfringeradio.com. Just go and click the link at the top, and you can see all the latest stuff that we have there going on. So, again, I want to thank our guest, Ignacio Esteban, for coming on the podcast. And we'll have another great episode for you guys next week here at Dark Fringe Radio.